The General Slocum caught fire on the East River in 1904, and when the captain ordered full steam ahead, the fire spread faster. The hoses burst when the crew tried to fight it. The lifeboats were wired to the deck, and when passengers grabbed the life vests and jumped, the vests pulled them straight to the bottom. The Knickerbocker Steamship Company had been operating the General Slocum for 13 years. Maintenance was not a priority. On the morning of June 15, 1904, she left Manhattan with more than 1,000 passengers on board for a chartered church picnic. 20 minutes into the voyage, a fire started below deck. What was inside those life vests was put there on purpose. The fire started in a forward cabin called the lamp room, used to store the ship's oil lamps and the barrels used to refill them. Oily rags covered the floor. A quantity of packing straw had been left there too. The cause was never determined. A discarded match or a cigarette is the most likely explanation. When the fire was discovered, a crew member reached for a fire hose. It burst immediately because the linen was rotten and had never been replaced or maintained, and the material had sold for less than 20 cents per foot. A second hose could not be connected to the water supply at all. The crew had not conducted a fire drill in over a year. Some accounts say they had never conducted one. A 12-year-old boy ran to tell Captain William Van Schaik. The captain didn't believe him. The fire was 10 minutes old before Van Schaik received an official report. His response was to order full steam ahead. There was a dock nearby. Van Schaik chose not to use it. He later testified he had spotted oil storage tanks on the shore and feared the fire would spread to the waterfront. He aimed instead for North Brother Island, 2 miles upriver, where a quarantine hospital sat on the bank. The consequences of running at full speed were physical. The General Slocum was built with open salon windows running the length of the upper decks. At full throttle, those windows fed fresh air directly into the fire below. Every additional knot accelerated the spread. The wooden hull, repainted multiple times with flammable paint, caught easily. By the time the ship reached Hellgate, the upper decks were gone. The 6 lifeboats stored on the hurricane deck were wired in place with metal fastenings, some painted over during the ship's last repaint. With fire burning through the deck below, they could not be reached or freed. Not a single lifeboat was launched. The life vests were mounted along the railings of the promenade deck. Brand name: Kahnweiler's Never Sink, manufactured by Nonpareil Cork Works in Camden, New Jersey. They had been mounted outside on deck, exposed to weather, for 13 years without inspection or replacement. The canvas had rotted. The cork inside had turned to powder. That was the official account. Federal investigators found something else inside them. Inside each cork block there were iron bars, 8 ounces each, 6 inches long, inserted precisely to bring the weight up to the legal minimum of 6 pounds of good cork per life vest. Nonpareil Cork Works had been substituting iron for cork to cut material costs while still passing official inspection. The law specified a minimum weight. On an inspector's scale, the vest registered correctly. Nobody ever opened them. The vests didn't float. They sank. Parents who strapped them onto their children and threw them into the East River had no way of knowing that. The General Slocum grounded on North Brother Island 20 minutes after the fire was first reported. She grounded on her BOW not her side as Van Schaik had intended. The stern, where most surviving passengers had retreated from the flames, was still hanging over 25 feet of tidal current. The paddle wheels were still turning when people jumped. At least one was pulled under by them. A patient recovering from illness at the island's quarantine hospital, a 17-year-old named Ferry McCann, swam out into the debris and pulled children to shore again and again until she couldn't anymore. The final death toll was 1,021 people. It was the deadliest day in New York City history until September 11, 2001. More stories like this are coming. Subscribe so you don't miss them. President Roosevelt formed a federal commission 8 days after the disaster. The report was delivered on October 8, 1904. The commission went through every safety system on the boat. Fire hoses, rotten linen at under 20 cents per foot, incapable of holding pressure. Lifeboats, wired and painted in place, impossible to deploy in an emergency. Life vests, 13 years old, mounted outside, never inspected, filled with iron. The fire pump was not examined during the official inspection 6 weeks before. Fire drills had not been conducted in over a year, possibly never. Then the commission found the layer underneath the equipment failures. Knickerbocker Steamship Company President Frank A. Barnaby had falsified records to show that new life vests had been purchased. They had not been. On September 29, 1904, the Department of Justice arrested 4 officers of Nonpareil Cork Works under Section 5440 of the revised statutes: manager J. H. Stone, H. C. Quintard, and Charles and James Russ. The charge was conspiring to defraud the federal government by inserting iron bars into certified life vest materials. Roosevelt's own cover letter to the commission described the offense as being of so heinous a character that it is difficult to comment upon it with proper self-restraint. The inspector who had certified the equipment, Henry Lundberg, had declared the 13-year-old vests up to date and of good quality without examining the fire pump, the hoses, or the 6 lifeboats painted to the deck. He was indicted and tried for manslaughter. Acquitted, acquitted, acquitted. Nonpareil Cork Works was indicted, not convicted. Barnaby and the Knickerbocker directors were indicted and were effectively acquitted. The company received a fine. If you are wondering how none of them went to prison for killing 1,021 people, so was everyone who covered the trial at the time. 8 people were indicted in total. 1 was convicted. Captain William Van Schaik, 64 years old, was found guilty of criminal negligence for failing to maintain fire drills and fire extinguishers aboard his vessel. He was sentenced to 10 years at Sing Sing prison. His wife campaigned for a presidential pardon from the day of sentencing. In 1911, President Taft granted it. Van Schaik had served 3 years. Whether he was genuinely negligent or simply the only person the system was prepared to convict is a question the trial was not designed to answer, because the people who could have answered it were never compelled to testify under oath. In March 1905, 9 months after the fire, Congress amended Section 4405 of the revised statutes. For the first time, the Board of Supervising Inspectors had legal authority to mandate specific fire prevention measures and to require a defined type and quantity of life-saving equipment on every passenger vessel operating on American waters. Before that amendment, An inspector could certify what was there. He had no authority to require what had to be there. The General Slocum created that authority. Every commercial passenger vessel on American waters today carries equipment mandated under a legal framework that did not exist before this fire. The General Slocum herself was salvaged from North Brother Island and converted into a coal barge renamed the Maryland. In 1911, she foundered off New Jersey and sank. Author Clive Cussler located the wreck decades later. It still exists on the seafloor. The disaster was locally remembered for a few years. The Titanic sank in 1912 and became the maritime catastrophe that history kept. Then, the United States entered a war against Germany in 1917. Historian Edward O'Donnell, in his 2003 book Ship Ablaze, documents how anti-German sentiment during the First World War eradicated sympathy for anything German, including the innocent victims of the General Slocum fire. By the 1920s, the disaster had left public memory almost entirely. One survivor, Adela Wotherspoon, was 6 months old that day. She lived to 100. Before she died, someone asked why the Slocum was forgotten when the Titanic was not. The Titanic had a great many famous people on it. This was just a family picnic. More stories like this are coming. Subscribe so you do not miss them.